Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Andrew Bosley, freelance illustrator and owner of Wits Studios. He's illustrated many tabletop hits, including Everdell, Tapestry, and Merchants of the Dark Road. Additionally, he's done concept art for video games such as Ghost Recon, Assassin's Creed, and Paladins. Andrew, welcome to the Binge. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, James. I appreciate you letting me come on.
Oh, thanks for joining us. I really do appreciate it. It is always awesome to get artists on this show as well. It's a very different perspective that I don't think that people talk about enough, quite frankly. So I thought we'd start off actually just with your basic story. You were a graduate, I believe, from San Jose University in illustration.
Mm-hmm. Yep, San Jose State. Back in 2006. Huh?
2006. So there's been some time from there to here. How did you kind of get started? How did you get into? Obviously, you're well established now, but there was kind of a bit of a grind there for a while. How did that work?
Sure. So I went to San Jose State for illustration. My intentions when I first arrived there for career was very different than what I ended up going into, and it's definitely different from where I am now. But I was by the time I graduated, I knew I was interested in heading towards video games or feature animation, working in visual development or concept art, and so I was working towards that the whole time that I was in school. But also quite a bit on the illustration side as well. They overlap quite a bit. I was married and had kids. My third child was on the way when I graduated from college.
Oh, wow.
So
hands full.
There was a bit of a grind to pay the bills and things like that. When I was in school, I was a mural painter, and so that was. Working in the Bay Area in California, and
so literally the sides of buildings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I was working most of the time in residential homes, so inside,
Okay.
thankfully most of the time. But no, I did some commercial things and sides of buildings and all that good stuff.
How long does that take? Like a mural, if you're doing the side of a building, I gotta imagine that's not a few hours. That's weeks,
No,
is it, or months?
It could be. It depends on the project, but it could be weeks, certainly up to a month. Some things. I wish I could. I wish I could have pumped out a mural back in the day, like how I work digitally now, and it's so much simpler and easier. But
sure.
But yeah, just traditional media, all by itself, just takes a little bit more time and purposeful thought as you're going. There's no undos like I have in Photoshop or on my iPad, so it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more planning, I think, gosh, it's been such a long time, but most of the murals that I worked on would usually probably take 2 to 3 weeks. I don't think often they would be past that.
Wow. And then from there you went off and now, was it your own business? Were you working with a company, or how was this kind of mural business established?
That was all me. I didn't know of any. There weren't any opportunities to really work or coordinate with other people. So I had done something. I had done a mural it seemed like a long time, just shortly after graduating from high school, and that there was a gap between my high school and going to college. But right after high school, I had a good friend from church that was just a traditional house painter, and he was working at a home, and they needed a mural for their kids' room, and I was the only artist that this painter knew, and so he's like, "Hey, do you paint murals?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, I definitely
now I do."
Now I do, and so I painted that mural, and I think it took me. It was the first time. I'm sure it took me a month or something like that, and I got paid $400, and I was like, "Yeah, look at how awesome I am!" And
yeah,
and but after that, so I knew that was something I wanted to do. I knew it was something I could do on my own. I didn't need, to be, I didn't need a team necessarily to do that. So when I was married, when I was starting college, I looked at lots of different things to do to make money, but that was kind of the thing that seemed to be the most time efficient if it could work. But it was very hard. It was a very, very challenging time. So it was.
They don't call it starving artists for no reason, right? Like
No,
it's a hustle, right? So you did your own hustle right out of school. So you were freelancing kind of from the beginning, right?
Yeah, now that was all during my time in school. I
Okay.
was fortunate that after I graduated, which was 5 years later, I had my BFA, and I was able to get hired into a studio to work full time pretty quickly. But before that, all throughout college, I was freelancing, and I kind of always knew I wanted to get back to freelancing at one point, at some point in my future. But yeah, so freelancing before the full-time job at the studio, and then when the time was right, I made my exit from Ubisoft where I was working, and then went freelance again.
So now in the video game industry, and I mentioned some pretty big titles on the intro there. Can you talk a little bit about that? So help people understand like concept illustrations, right? So what is that specific? Because when you play a video game, everything's moving. You're not really seeing sketches and things like that, right? So how does that integrate?
So yeah, it's a really important phase, important part of the process of making a game, and there are comparable roles in any blockbuster film, that's sci-fi or fantasy, certainly feature animation, which that title is called a visual development artist when you're in feature animation, but it's concept art in most other entertainment industry areas. But basically the job is you're coming up with ideas, you're pitching those to an art director or the director of the film or the project, and they are taking those ideas and then making them into final artwork. The idea being that a concept artist is trained to be very, very fast and to come up with a variety of ideas quickly. So as opposed to, going to the 3D, character team or the environment team for a game and having them go, all right, just make me this really cool space. And it's going to take them, I don't know, weeks, months maybe to polish and make this really nice thing. And we're not even sure if it's actually what we want. They'll hire a concept artist who, can do a lot of rough stuff really fast. I might be asked to design some really rough, characters for a design, designing a character. I might do 4 or 5 iterations in one day. And that's something that, or 20 to 50 silhouette drawings of a character, in one day that then the art director can look at and go, okay, well, we don't want, out of the 50 I've got here in front of me, I know I don't want 40 of them, here's 10. Okay, tomorrow come back and give me some slightly more, give me a little bit more detail and information on these 10. And so slowly we just narrow it down until ideally you come up with one design, and that is what is then given to the asset team, who will make a polished in-game asset, and which can be animated and rigged and all that sort of stuff if it's a character, or model out the whole environment.
So if you have the talent, it sounds like the dream job, right? You just putting your creativity out there nonstop, just churning through creative idea after creative idea.
It's a really fun job. I didn't even know it existed when I started school. Working at was going to the university. It wasn't until I was there, and plenty of the people who were already there did know about it, and I was introduced to like the art of Star Wars books and things like that. And so I was just looking, and I realized here, there's a job out there where all you do is just draw cool things all the time. And I was like, okay, that's it. But whatever I wanted to do before is done. This is what I want to do. At the same time, that being said, at the same time, while I was being trained, for concept art, I was also, back when I was in school, it was still a relatively new field.
Yeah.
And so my actual degree, my professors and my direction was mostly pure illustration. Like I did a lot of my work in acrylics, traditional
Oh,
painting,
wow. Okay.
prepping for perhaps a job working for National Geographic as an illustrator. And so, but while doing that, and then I gained a love for illustration. So that is, I love concept art, and I miss that I don't do it as much these days because it's its own thing and it's very neat. But I love illustration, and I love I've always had a passion and interest in history of illustration and different types of illustration. So I was really introduced to that in school. It was fantastic.
And then, so the transition to drawing digitally, do you say now predominantly all your illustrations are all in a digital form?
Yeah. Yeah. I always have a sketchbook with me. I like to say that I'm always drawing. I don't as often as I would like to, but that's mostly the only traditional stuff I do is when I'm jotting down ideas or coming up with compositions for an illustration or something like that. But it's almost entirely digital when I'm actually doing professional work for other people. Pretty much everything in here on that on the site there is, yeah, that's all digital stuff.
So
Some
for
of it's
people who
concept.
are not necessarily watching but listening,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to bosleyart.com, you'll see some of Andrew's work. I mean, it is stunning. The detail. I mean, I'm going to open up this this Dyes District illustration here. Like the detail in this image is incredible. It is amazing.
This is a good example of kind of the difference between concept art and illustration. Like, you know, I'm trying to create a presentable image to give to somebody, but there's a lot of shortcuts you take in concept art because it's not really about the final product as far as it's not, I'm not creating a work of art. This is this particular piece was for a video, you know, I was creating a concept for an environment. And so, you know, I'm copy and pasting a whole bunch of stuff in here
Sure.
to just get something across fast. And so I like that it turned out well, but it's more about getting an idea across and that knowing in concept art that I could pitch that one day and it's thrown in the trash the next. So.
Wow. I mean, again, for people who are listening, this image is the kind of image you would see on the cover of a game, or you would see on a very detailed player board or card. Like, to say this is fast or this would have gone in the trash is that's impressive. That is impressive. That's a good highlight, I think, of your talent.
Well,
So,
thanks.
how did you get into board games? So you did the grind. You went into video games, which seemed like the dream job. Maybe there's a lot of pressure in a job like that because you're having to crank through a lot of ideas fast, right? And then, okay, now tomorrow we need another 10 on the 10 you just did. But still, the kind of the dream job. So what kind of then pulled you over to the board game industry?
Well, it's funny. I still do stuff in video games occasionally,
Sure.
not as much as before. But again, always with the intention that I wanted to kind of be my own boss for a long time. That was, I don't know, that was just what my definition of an illustrator is. I was going to be on my own, and that's something I was interested in doing. I knew I was going to make a transition at some point, but I always at that point thought it was going to be still with video games. It was. I mean, I left Ubisoft in 2013. I think I got my first board game gig probably a couple years after that. That was with doing Mission Red Planet. And then I think it was maybe a year after that I did Citadels, some of the work for Citadels, the reboot of that. But even at that time, it wasn't necessarily something I thought it was just I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was great to do, but I just thought it was another job. But I got that job because while I was working at Ubisoft and Red Storm, I started to develop a freelance career on the side. Nothing that could compete with video games. So
Like
it was
a hobby
always going to
almost,
be.
right?
I'm sorry.
Like a hobby almost.
Well, I mean, I was doing it to supplement my income,
Okay.
but it was and it was certainly with a future in mind, but there were very specific things I could do and not do, and so I actually started working with Fantasy Flight, doing a lot of their RPG stuff, some of their trading cards back in the day, and working for some really, not them, but before that, even, very low level companies, just doing random art and getting paid nothing for it. But after working with Fantasy Flight for some time, my relationship with the art directors there had gotten pretty good, and they knew me well, and they knew that the stuff I was doing was not necessarily what I wanted. It wasn't my favorite style of stuff. I was just another artist making the thing for them, just like anybody else they could hire. Yeah. And eventually I kind of stopped doing some stuff with them. And then they eventually came to me and were like, okay, we got something that I think is just for you. And Mission Red Planet was that. And we want you to do all the artwork for it. And we want, and it was perfect. It was a neat opportunity to be an artist for a project where I wasn't just one of, I don't know, several dozen different artists working on something. I was going to have my name on the, attached to the game, and that, there's some pride or some whatever, ego or whatever that felt good. And so I took on that job, and that went well. But again, it was just going to be a thing. And then I was just going to go back to video games. I probably was working with video game clients at the time while I was doing it, but, and I was working on a board game of my own, a card game of my own, even through all of that. But even while doing that, for whatever reason, I didn't think tabletop was where, it just didn't consider it. I didn't even think about it. And so it wasn't, I still did some fantasy illustration on the sides for different companies. I was doing stuff for Keyforge and whatnot, again, with Fantasy Flight or Asmodee. And it really wasn't until Everdell came along that was a large amount of work in one project that it made sense. It was a practical choice to go, okay, I could do this, or I could be working on this project. And so they asked me to come on board for this, and it was awesome. And since then, it's been pretty much all board games. But it's funny, it wasn't until kind of around this time that I was kind of remembering, like, most of my life, like, I've always been a board game person. I used to make board games when I was in high school. I remember getting together with friends, and we designed some battlefield chess, with archers, and we made pieces had certain moves, and we had this rollout mat, and we made stuff, and it was just, but I don't know. It was just something that kind of I had forgotten until all of this came about, and now I'm pretty all in on board all the time.
Well, certainly the Everdell cover is probably one I would say is iconic, right? Like, you recognize that artwork very quickly when you see it. When you did Everdell, and we'll get into a second how you met these guys, right? And even same with Tapestry, how you got connected with Stonemeyer. Mm-hmm. Did you do, like, obviously the cards and the cover, those styles clearly match. Were you involved in the board as well? Or did they have like a graphic designer come in and kind of take inspiration from your creations and then create the board?
Well, I was found for Everdell by the graphic designer and art director, Dan May, who was working at the time full-time with Tabletop Tycoon and Starling Games and Game Salute. And he was the graphic designer for the project, but anything that is painted for the most part is mine. So the board, any of the tree, I didn't design the shape of the tree or how it was assembled, but everything on the tree, I painted. So anything that is, UI type stuff for the game, like coins and things like that, I did not touch for Everdell. I have done that for other games, but in the case of Everdell, that was done by Dan. But yeah, so that was one where it was like I really got a chance to just have my hand in it all, which was fun
and shine, quite frankly. Like, how did you connect them? It was the same thing with the Stonemeyer? Was it, again, their lead graphic artist kind of reaching out to you? Was it based on your reputation in the industry, or how did some of these other relationships come together?
So with Tapestry, it was a little bit different. I had, I think, done a few different things by the time that Jamie reached out to me. So it was just a relationship with me and Jamie that started it. He emailed me, and I was quite excited, being a fan of his games. But in the case of Tapestry, I did have a lot more involvement in some of the graphic design elements. It was kind of hasn't happened much since then or before, but I really got to practice some of my concept art chops with that, because he just said, hey, whatever you think would make this look good, I want you to tackle this. Ultimately, he has a graphic designer that did a lot of the back end things to get it to production. But when it came to designing icons and the whole look of the whole thing, every banner, everything on every component, for the most part, it was something I painted or designed myself. And then so we spent about a month going back and forth, just going, okay, I think this could be cool if it looked like this. Or I give him options, and it would be a top down of the entire game, within the first month. That's what we were doing. So everything was very rough. There was no finished illustrations or anything, but kind of just getting the colors, how they work, and could some pieces, look like they fit next to each other and things like that. And so that was all stuff we solved there. So different than Everdell, and then I was just painting the illustrations with Everdell. This one I was painting the illustrations and everything else with it.
And I think that answers some of the question that Jeff Beck from Grandpa Beck Games is watching right now, and he'd actually asked that question in the chat room here. He said, how have you used kind of your background in concept art to give you an advantage in terms of the mechanic, tying in with the mechanics of the game and so forth. And it sounds like on Tapestry, that's exactly what happened, right? You had the mechanics of the game, and based on how certain components, as you're saying, are going to be side other components, that would then inform maybe the color schemes or the design and so forth.
Yeah. And it's nice having a design background myself of, up to this point, I've done a fair amount of my own things on the side, and being a gamer myself, it's
sure,
I could tackle some of that part of the development, knowing, okay, this is how the game is going to be played. This is what's important for people to understand, when it, we need to make the gameplay mode. That's probably one of the biggest things that came from concept art was knowing that the art always has to support the gameplay. That's something I learned very well in video games. Again, knowing that what I'm creating is at least in that role, it's quite temporary. No one's going to ever see the concept art I do most of the time. So I need to make sure that it works well with the game that's being made. It's not about my art. And in the case of in board games, certainly the art plays the 2D art plays a bigger role in board games, but it has to make the game better. If it's just there for the art's sake, then it's not doing its job. So I think that has helped.
So when dealing with some of these publishers or game developers, what would you say is some advice you would give? There's always and Sarah Keel, we interviewed a few weeks ago, and a great artist as well. Mm-hmm. And, the elephant in the room is discussing, costs and, what the value of that artwork is. What's the best way to approach a conversation like that from a developer side coming to you?
They should just throw money at artists. And they should just
hand over their debit card.
They're going to slide over a number on a piece of paper, and I say triple it, and they go, okay, how it's supposed to work. No, gosh, well, I think it comes from, it's just like any other thing that you're hiring somebody for in board games. I don't get paid generally by commit, for with royalties or anything like that. It's just paying for a thing. So I'm an expense. But I think what publishers and designers need to remember is what a huge impact that art can have on a game. I think that's much less than it has been in the past, but I mean, my entire career, you have clients that appreciate what art is and what it costs, and then you have clients that don't, and so I would say to designers and developers that it's worth some money, but gosh, I'm trying to think of.
Here's what I would say, all right? Just to kind of throw a life raft in there. If you ask an artist, what it's going to give them a spec of what you're going to do, what you want to do,
mm-hmm.
and they come back with a quote, the worst thing you can say is, well, can you do it for half of that?
Mm-hmm.
You're much better served, in my opinion, coming to someone like yourself and say, look, here's a game I'm looking at creating. Here's a budget I have.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do for that budget?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a fit or there's not. They're either going to say, look, you know what, based on that budget, the time involved, I'm not going to be able to get you what you need in terms of all the components of your game, but maybe I can just do the cover, or maybe I can just do this component over here, or maybe there's no fit at all. Maybe the gap is too far. But it's always, it's a sensitive topic, right? And because you don't want to insult, the creator, like when you create something, this is coming from you. Like there's other than, having kids. I mean, I can't think of any other thing that comes from something that you create. Right. And so it's very personal. And, I think that when people approach those situations, I think they just have to give it the respect and sensitivity that it deserves.
I think you're right. And going back to the first thing you said, as far as how to approach it, that's a great point. I mean, that is how I work with my clients all the time. There's sometimes it's not going to be a fit cost wise at all. And there's so many artists out there, fantastic artists in our industry that do great. And we have a range of different skills and a range of styles and a range of cost as well. So I know when people come to me, and most of the time people come and they go, how much is this going to cost? And I send them a number, and they may not answer my email after I send them a number sometimes, or most of the time they respond back, and many of them go, no, that sounds great. That makes sense. It might be, I'm not a cheap artist. And so some of them might go, okay, that might be a little bit more than I was planning, but we're going to make it work. And I've had clients that but oftentimes, very often, clients will come to me and they'll go, okay, that's all very reasonable, but it's just very hard for us with our budget. What can we do? And I'll, having done this enough times now, it's like, okay, if I could do this, and it doesn't change the quality, it just changes how much time it takes. There's certain things I might not do. An easy example is, in Everdell, I did unique backgrounds and unique characters and environments for every single piece. So that takes a significant amount of time. But if I only need to illustrate a character on a background that stays the same every time, then the cost is significantly lowered. And so, I have a lot of these things in my bag that I can propose to people and go, here's how we can lower this. So I get to work, we get to work together, but hopefully it eases the cost burden a little bit.
And certainly I think, given the games that you've worked on, and I was trying to do the math. It's not public information how much Tapestry generated. I've got the Kickstarter numbers for the other two. But your artwork has showed up, I would estimate, on games that have reached at least $2 million. So you've got an established name, right? So when someone's coming to you specifically, they're probably coming to you not just because they love your style, but there's a following and there's a credibility that comes with your name as well, right? Like you've become a kind of a popular artist in the board game industry.
That's what people sometimes say to me, but I don't see that. But it's very flattering when people say that. So
that's the word on the street, anyways. So
I do have people who will say having your name on it could have an impact, and that's very nice to hear, and I hope that that's the case.
Oh, very good. Where do you go from here? What's the next kind of project you have on the horizon? Is there another game that you're working on right now you can share, or is there another kind of passion project you're working on, or?
Yes, all of the above. Gosh, there's lots of projects that are always, client projects that are going to be coming out. Probably the most recent thing is the expansion for Tapestry has been announced, and some of the art is being shared for that. Let's see, as far as client stuff, there's several. Some I can't say anything about, and some I there's too many others that I miss somebody if I started at bringing them up. But definitely some things on the personal side. I've created my own brand called Wits Studios. I have a couple game titles that are being made at the moment. One, unfortunately, is being a little bit delayed because there is another project that's coming up that is not a Wits End project, but something I'm very, very excited about that will be kickstarted in November is a thing called the Wanderer's Guide. That
cool.
is a fantasy RPG atlas. It'll be fully illustrated. It's going to be about 50 plus pages of just art that could with that's not system specific. So someone playing D&D, someone playing Pathfinder, somebody, any type of system you're working with RPGs, here is a book that you could just open up and go, we're going to be in this big city. So we've got 3 cities in here that you can play in, and this is inspiration for what you're going to do. It's honestly, I'm really, really excited about it. I'm not a huge RPG guy myself, but my kids are, so they're helping me come up with some of the ideas. But it's a partnership with a great partner, and we have actually a really great team that's helping to get the word out and things like that. And all I'm doing is just painting all day long, for it. And so anyways, Wanderer's Guide, if anybody that wants to go check it out, it's we have people getting ready for the Kickstarter on a site, thewanderersguidebook.com.
Is there going to be links on your site as well? So your site again is bosleyart.com.
There isn't right now.
I noticed. That's why I'm prompting you, man.
I know. I need to. I am, as many of my fans know, I have a love-hate. I don't know how much love, but I have a funny relationship with online-ness. I'm a fairly offline guy, and so a lot of my website is so out of date. I mean, that I have half of my artwork on there as concept art. It shows most of all my work is board games these days. It should just be all board games.
You got to publish it all. I know. I mean, your portfolio is robust to say the least, and there's so much more you could be throwing on that site. So anybody listening that maybe wants to help Andrew get some stuff up on his site, maybe reach out to him on his website. I'm sure he could use some help. But I just want to thank you for coming on this podcast. It's been a lot of fun, and I wish you all the best with Wits End. It's awesome. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thanks, James. I appreciate it.
You take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.